Hey everyone, Explosion Pills here, and welcome to a magic show. So today I'm going to be talking about my opinions on the limited set format for Streets of New Capenna. I know the set's been out for a little while. Originally I wanted to do a set review. Timing didn't really pan out, and I think it's kind of a little bit too late to do a set review on this set right now. So instead I'm just going to go into an in-depth overall look at the set and talk about a few things that come to mind. And the first question, what I want to couch this whole thing in is Brokers beatable? And I think the answer that everyone knows to that question at this point is yes. Broker is definitely very powerful, probably the most powerful three-color combination. But at this point, there are a lot of other viable color combinations, and even the three-color combinations, it's possible. You know, Obscura, I've won with. You can win with anything, essentially, as long as you build the right deck. But if you're not playing the Broker's colors, I think that you're at a disadvantage there. And the reason for that is that Broker's just has so many powerful cards and powerful commons as well. Insanely powerful commons, and of course the star of the show is going to be Inspiring Overseer. You know, when people first saw this card, they were like, well, this can't be as powerful as it looks. You know, kind of tempered their expectations a little bit, and if you weren't tempering your expectations, maybe you would rate this at like a B plus even. So we had no idea, like looking at the 17 lands data, which I know is not the end all be all, but looking at game in hand win rate, and it's the top common, and it's even in the top 10 cards of the entire set with like a 62%, almost 63% game in hand win rate, which is just bananas. Like if we want to force rank the cards and grade them based on the percentage win rate, and if you get, you know, above 62% is maybe an A plus or an A, I guess it depends, but then this card is like an A, or if not an A plus, which is just absolutely insane. Like you wouldn't expect that from this kind of card, even just looking at it on its surface, knowing that it's really powerful. And that has a lot to do with the set in general. I think this is a very tempo based set, and it's really important to know that, especially going into the set, and that impacts your gameplay and your drafting decisions a lot. So tempo, it's a difficult concept to understand. I'm not going to go super in depth here. I definitely don't understand it completely. But essentially, you want to be racing your opponent a lot of the time. You want to be playing very aggressively as well. So that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't use mid-range or control strategies, but they're all tempo strategies. You know, you want to be aggressive, aggro tempo, control tempo. It's all tempo based. And Inspiring Overseer gives you everything that you need for that. You know, the life offsets a little bit of the in the race, your opponent can't kill you as quickly. You have a flyer. Flyers are really important because they can push damage. Pushing damage is going to be important. Hits hard with the 2 power, and of course it draws you a card, so you can just keep going. And you know, the value cards in this set have been disappointing. Like, what's the name of the white? Yeah, Rumor Gatherer. That's what it is. Like, this card is not particularly good, and the main reason why it's not that good is because of its stats. It's just a 2/1. Like, think about this. Inspiring Overseer, a common, 2/1 flyer, gains a life and draws a card, guaranteed. Rumor Gatherer, you're not even guaranteed to draw a card at all. Like, you might scry 1 or 2. It doesn't fly, has the same stats as an uncommon, more difficult mana cost. Like, just comparing these two cards is kind of ridiculous. And it is funny, since Rumor Gatherer is also in white, which I think white is probably going to be the most powerful color. I think that's pretty clear. So just going over like the white commons, you can see just what they have to offer here. You know, Boon of Safety is playable, Backup to Agent, quite good, Hold for Ransom. Oftentimes you're winning by turn 7. You know, it's a bit of an emergency if someone can pay the 7 and attack you back. You generally haven't killed your opponent fast enough. So this is basically just passivism, which you need, and we'll go over the removal aspect of the format a little bit later as well. Rafine's Informant, I think, is the top white common other than Inspiring Overseer, if I'm not mistaken. Just looking at 17 lands data, you know, it's got a 60% win rate, which is just crazy. And yeah, you know, it's behind Jewel Thief, of course, and then Inspiring Overseer. So this is number 3 common, second best white common in the top, I don't know, 10th percentile of cards, I think. Maybe a little bit less than that, but still 60% win rate. And this is just a 2 mana card. And you know, you look at this card and you're like, how can this card be so powerful? It's not even card advantage. It's a 2-mana 3/2, which is nice, but the ability to connive, it just sets you up. You can definitely get your third land drop if you're missing it. You can discard cards either for value or that are no longer relevant in the game. That makes this useful at many different portions of the game, and then it just hits really hard as a 2-mana 3/2. Revelation of Power, all combat tricks are playable. Revelation of Power is a way to really change the race. Like, you can imagine casting this on a Rafine's Informant. All of a sudden it's a 5/4 life-linking flyer, so that's a 10-point life swing for 2 mana for Revelation of Power. So just another way to push damage, which is really important to the tempo. Skycryer, kind of the same thing. It's a 2-point life swing. You can push the damage because it's a flyer. This is not an incredible card, but it's certainly a playable card and not bad. And I find the card draw aspect of this, it's interesting, because from a tempo perspective, it does help. If your opponent is tapped out and you've almost killed them, and you have 4 mana up that you can't do anything else with anyway, you can draw a card and potentially draw your way into winning. And it's kind of a balance. Like, that's very, very minor upside, because you can say the same thing for your opponent. You're drawing them a card as well, but you get first crack at the card a lot of the time. So I think it's a slight advantage there. But overall, just the fact that this is a flyer and it's swinging the race just makes a huge difference. Gathering Throng, I think, has performed super well. Also, just checking 17 lands here. So 58%, almost 59% win rate. It's behind Make Disappear in terms of the commons, and yeah, it's the fourth best common overall, fifth best common rather, after Inspiring Overseer, Dual Thief, Rafine's Informant, Make Disappear. Then we have Gathering Throng, very high win rate and just very powerful. And I think even if you have 2 Gathering Throngs, that's enough. And more than that, it's just awesome. And it has to do with the stats. It hits hard, and it just keeps the cards coming. So if you have 3 of these and you cast 1, all of a sudden your opponent is going to have to find a way to deal with 3 of these potentially hitting them for 3 and just swinging the race. If they're trading off an X3 and they kill 1, they're just way behind, because now you have 2 more that are going to be coming in. Inspiring Overseer, of course, Kill Shot, playable removal spell. Celebrity Fencer can do some work. It's just a little bit expensive and underpowered at first, but it's not a bad card at all. I mean, white is just very powerful. Dapper Shield Mate, kind of the same thing. If you're on offense, this is just able to push more and more damage. It's going to kill your opponent. On defense, it's not really that good, but it can do some work, so it's certainly not bad. And then going into blue, so I think white is the most powerful color. I think 17 lands kind of reflects that as well. I think blue is probably the second most powerful color. It's close between white, blue, and green, but I think blue is second most powerful. And that if you want to play 2 colors, white, blue is probably the best. White, green is also very good, and you can splash for powerful 3-color cards in the broker's colors too. Expendable Lackeys, playable. Make Disappear, extremely well-performing card. And a lot of that has to do with the tempo aspect as well. Like, if you counter your opponent's 3-drop, or their 4-drop, they have probably lost the game at that point. They're just going to be way behind. Backstreet Bruiser and Broker's Veteran. Broker's Veteran I don't love, but is playable. All the 2-drops are, including Backstreet Bruiser. Kind of the same thing. It's not the best, but it's playable. Witness Protection, kind of a necessary evil, I think. Majestic Metamorphosis. This is the second time. The Kamigawa one, I can't remember what it was called, but had a similar effect. That was really good because they draw a card onto it. Its Majestic Metamorphosis is excellent here as well. It's a way to push damage because it gives your creature flying. You can trade up, and you get to draw a card on top of all of that. So another tempo positive play in Majestic Metamorphosis. Obscura Initiate, playable. It's a flyer. It can push damage. Psionic Snoop, not really that great, but playable under the right circumstances. Rooftop Nuisance, also a way to push damage. You can sack a useless creature, get 2 of your opponent's blockers out of the way, and all of a sudden they're taking a lot of damage to the face. And then Case of Joint, not particularly good because, again, this is a tempo format. And these kinds of controlling value cards, similar to Rumor Gatherer, they just don't make it in this format here. Case of Joint is a good example of that as well. And then Echo Inspector, also excellent. 3/4 in the air, very hard to kill. 4 toughness is very important in this set, and it can just continue to push damage as well while protecting your life total if you need. So just very good. And then looking at green, again, Attended Socialite and Civic Gardener, all the 2-drops are playable. You just need to get 2 drops. You need to get on the board, and they can push damage as well. Like Attended Socialite usually is hitting for 3, and occasionally even more than that. just pushing the damage. Civic Gardener, not the best upside, but it can do a little bit of work, just a 2-drop with minor upside. High-Rise Sawjack, also playable just because you need to protect yourself from the flyers. If you have a board stall and your opponent has flyers and they're pushing damage, you're just going to lose. So the High-Rise Sawjack can protect you from that. Jewel Thief, along with Inspiring Overseer, this is the number 2 common in the set. Also the common that when people saw, they were like, no, this is crazy, like there must be something wrong. For people new to limited Magic, if you didn't know, I guess 3 years ago at this point, in Core Set 2020, we had Centaur Courser that was 2 generic and a green for 3/3, and that's it. So this has all kinds of crazy upside stapled on top of it. The treasure is useful for ramping, fixing, vigilance, and trample. Just another way to push damage. I mean, you can just keep pushing this through. Back it up with combat tricks. Just a really strong card, and it's showing in the data as well, of course, the number 2 common. I think initially in the format people were suggesting, sometimes, some people said that possibly Jewel Thief could be even better than Inspiring Overseer. We would have to see how it played out. And the crazy thing is I think that both of those cards just ended up exceeding everyone's expectations. Like we thought that they were both going to be good, tempering things a little bit. Like they wouldn't have printed these crazy powerful commons unless there was something in the format that was holding them back. And the opposite turned out to be true. They both exceeded our expectations like crazy, and Inspiring Overseer exceeded our expectations even more, just being a supremely powerful card, and Jewel Thief, up there. And you can play them both together. They're both Broker's cards. Part of the reason why Brokers are so powerful is these 2 cards too. Social Climber rather, not particularly good. So a bit of a miss for green on that one. And then Kaldaya Strongarm, just another way to push damage. It's quite relevant. Draws you a card for tempo or for value purposes on top of giving you the tempo with the counters. Cast it a little bit early with the blitz. So yeah, just a good card. And then Civil Servant. I think Civil Servant is the top multicolored common. You can double check on that. Oh yeah, Civil Servant, top multicolored common. And it's number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is Gathering Throng. 6 is Broker's Hideout, which is pretty hilarious as well, just the land. And then number 7 of the commons is Civil Servant. Just a huge tempo. If you cast this on turn 2, turn 3 you have a citizen, maybe even a backup agent, make this 3/4, and then you hit for 4. You gain 4, 8-point life swing just from this 2-drop. It's just crazy, and it's got the push stats that help it as well as a 2/3. And then, of course, Spara's Adjudicators, just another excellent tempo play, a way to push damage, get your opponent's biggest blocker out of the way, and hit them for a bunch. And Spara's Adjudicators itself as well is a 4/4, pretty relevant body. The cheapest of all of these other than, well, I guess it's tied with Rakish Revelers for the cheapest, but definitely a lot better and stronger in the Broker's colors. So overall, just looking at the commons, the Brokers are super strong. They have so many strong options, especially in white. And then might as well look at the uncommons too. Riveteer's Decoy, fine. Venom Connoisseur can do some work. Bouncer's Beatdown, a good removal spell. Elegant Entourage, a way to push damage. It gives trample, which is great. It's got good stats. That 4 toughness is important. Same with Voice of the Vermin. It's not technically a 4/4, but you can attack with it at least once and push more damage as well. Freelance Muscle, not super impressive. Cleanup Crew. This kind of card is interesting because you still need these sorts of late game cards in the format. You don't necessarily need them. Like if you can push enough damage, you can do it and kill your opponent before they really get going. But this is the kind of card where if you're a bit more mid-rangey, your game plan goes a little bit longer. Cleanup Crew gets you back in the game, gain the life before the opponent can kill you, or remove the Hold for Ransom enchantment or something like that. And then it's a huge body. I think one of the biggest in the set that's uncommon or below at least. Like Delirious Libation, another combat trick. All the combat tricks are playable. This gives you another creature too. Darling of the Masses, fantastic. Has worked out really great. I was worried about the stats as a 2/4, but the 4 toughness is a big deal. And then pumping all your citizens, not just the citizen tokens that it makes, so it's kind of its own engine as well, but you can play this on turn 4 with a Civil Servant, tap this with the Civil Servant, and the Civil Servant is hitting for 4 and gaining you life. That's just crazy. And then Ceremonial Groundbreaker also. Good stats boost, cheap to equip on citizens, and gives trample. And pushing damage is the name of the game. And then the key brokers on commons and the stars of this show here are Disciplined Duelist and Lagrella the Magpie. Disciplined Duelist, the number 1 uncommon in the set. which is just crazy. And then other than that, we have Corpse Appraiser, a bit of an anomaly. Psychic Pickpocket in blue. And, oh, deselect the green there. So we can go over the white and the blue cards as well. And I'll get to Psychic Pickpocket. Mage's Attendant, also here. Super strong. Just the way to push through. You know, it hits hard. The Wizard can potentially mess up your opponent's game plan. I haven't seen it come up that much. It's kind of hard to tell, though, because your opponent's generally not going to play into it. Playing into it is a mistake, of course. But stats spread across bodies. You can use spells like Take to the Streets to make that relevant. So overall, just very strong. And then Lagrella the Magpie at number 5. Alongside Disciplined Duelist, you know, if you have one of these and one of these, it's very hard to lose. And, you know, I think the win rate reflects that. They're both above 60% in win rate. Disciplined Duelist up to 62.5%. And then Lagrella above 60%. Just very powerful cards. This is a removal spell. That's a big deal in terms of the tempo. But looking at some of the other cards in the Broker's colors, Swooping Protector is okay. Hypnotic Grifter can do some work for sure. Fairy Vandal, this was an awesome card in Eldraine that I really liked, and it definitely does the work here too. Very easy to trigger, you know, especially with Connive and things like that. Just a great card overall, and I think it's performed quite well. Windshield Agent is pretty good. Out of the Way, this is probably the top performing instant, if I'm not mistaken. No, it's behind Exotic Pets, but still in the top 10 for uncommons. Again, it's the tempo thing. Tempo plus value. You get your opponent's biggest blocker out of the way, especially if it's green, and you get to draw a card, help you find your combat tricks or additional creatures that you need or removal, so you can continue to push the damage. This kind of card is not always amazing, but in this format it's performing so well just because of how important tempo is. Just putting your opponent behind on board, getting you more resources, pushing the damage is just going to do it. Sleep with the Fishes is kind of the same deal. Sleep with the Fishes is actually performing a little bit better than Out of the Way as well. And then Psychic Pickpocket, the number 3 uncommon. Just the same thing. I mean, Out of the Way and Psychic Pickpocket are kind of similar, except with Out of the Way you get a random card, and with Psychic Pickpocket you get a 3/2 or 4/3 body that can continue to push damage too. I know it's not quite the same, but just a way to compare that and why Psychic Pickpocket might be performing a little bit better than Out of the Way, which is oftentimes going to draw you land, of course. But still an excellent card nonetheless. So that's just the commons and the uncommons and the Broker's colors, and you know, just for the heck of it, we can look at the rares. Giada Fontapope, this card is just unreal. Just a way to push damage, very strong herself. And if you have any other angels in the deck, which there are crazy angels at common, like the Celestial Regulator is one that I didn't even get to, that can lock a creature down or at least push it out of the way, and it's a flyer, just another way to push damage. And imagine that coming in as a 3/4, and we'll just take a look at it. Yeah, so yeah, Celestial Regulator here. You have Giada, you play this on turn 3, it comes in as a 3/4, it has its own counter on it, so it can lock something down. That's just crazy. And of course we have Inspiring Overseer as well that works with Giada. So just the bananas card, performing really well as well. Yeah, she has an above 60% win rate. Extraction Specialist, kind of the same thing. Like, this card is a bit curious to me. It's not always easy to get it to work, but again, I think it's just got really aggressive stats. 3/2 with lifelink, you're creating a 6-point life swing, and in a tempo format that matters a lot. And when it finally is traded off, you still have a resource around that you can use, and maybe it was even a backup agent or something like that. You get some additional value. Halo Fountain, I haven't seen much play. Depopulate is okay. Elspeth, one of the top performing cards as well. Let me see where she is, because I think she's in the top 10. Yeah, she's number 6. So she's interesting. I think you need a board of creatures, and then you make one of them particularly imposing, push damage with flying, you know, +1/+1 counter, of course. And they have to deal with Elspeth, so they have to spend additional resources dealing with her. Otherwise, you can just ultimate on 2 turns later, and you'll win the game. Like, that ultimate is essentially unbeatable, especially in this format. Mysterious Limousine, also really good, kind of the same deal. Get your opponent's biggest blocker out of the way and push damage. it can hit pretty hard itself. Rabble Rousing. So this one is interesting because when I first saw this card, I thought, this is like an A. This is a very powerful card, and the pundits, other people that I've watched and listened to, I don't think anyone thought this was a bad card. I think people more or less had it and rated it as kind of like a B, maybe a build around. Not everyone was super high on it though, and I think it's turned out to be the ridiculous bond that it is. In a recent podcast, LSV said it's almost as powerful. It's a ridiculous bond that's almost as powerful as Inspiring Overseer, which is good company to have. And so this card, I think everyone has kind of figured it out at this point, but you only need really a one creature advantage, and then you can just start snowballing that advantage, just attacking every turn, doubling your creatures, and within a few turns, you'll completely overwhelm your opponent. Like, you'll have more creatures than they can deal with, and you've gone so wide that you can just kill them with the damage. So that's how this card works. And I think that people were held back a little bit just because you can't always attack in limited, but it's important to keep in mind that sometimes you just don't want to attack because you don't want to trade, or you're not going to have favorable attacks, or not all your creatures can attack. But with Rabble Rousing, you can chump attack with a few creatures. As long as the result is that you're up one creature, that's more than enough. And then that's really all you need to do with this card. I mean, the hideaway effect of this card is really just icing on the cake. Not even really necessary. So it's been performing very well too. So yeah, 61% win rate. I believe it's the best of the hideaway enchantments as well. Let's see where Fight Rigging is. Yeah, so Fight Rigging, also an excellent one. Of course, the Broker's got the 3 most powerful hideaway enchantments too, because why not? Then Sanctuary Warden, most powerful card in the set. I was not exactly skeptical. Like, I knew that this would be an A+ card, very powerful, but I thought maybe something like Broker's Ascendancy, or, well, first of all, I thought Obnixilis was going to be the most powerful card. And then I thought something like Broker's Ascendancy or some other kind of value-y card would end up being the best. But it's kind of just been the so-called Timmy cards, like Sanctuary Warden is number 1, All-Seeing Arbiter number 2. Where is he? And then Hostile Takeover, which is just a ridiculous bomb. That's a bit of an outlier there. And then Titan of Industry is number 3. So these cards, I undervalued them a little bit. I knew that they would be awesome cards, but I thought that the value cards would be better and these creatures would be held back a little bit, but it turns out not to be the case just because of the tempo. Like, these are the best statted creatures in the set. 5 power flyers and then 7/7 trample. Not much can compete with that. So they can just push the damage they need, and then they give you additional value as well. Like, they're all built in 3-for-1s. So as if the stats weren't enough, they also give you that value. So performing really well, obviously. Reservoir Kraken, super strong. Undercover Operative, also just super powerful. Wiretapping, I mean, it's playable, maybe more so in sealed, but not the kind of card you usually want. It's just too expensive for what it does. But Fight Rigging, on the other hand, has been amazing. Very easy to trigger, and just the additional +1/+1 counter every turn, because stats are so important, and the overall stats of the creatures is held down just a little bit. This has turned out to be really strong. Oh, and not to mention Ledger Shredder and Gallag Readers are both good cards too. Topiary Stomper, Vivian's okay. Workshop Warchief is excellent. So just in the Broker's colors, they got really powerful rares as well that are some of the top performing ones. And of course they have the best Ascendancy, because why not? The only playable Ascendancy really as well. None of the other ones really get there. But Broker's Ascendancy is far and away the best Ascendancy, and it's in the top 10 cards of the set too. Let's see, performing at number 7, 63% win rate. So Broker's Ascendancy, just bananas. So the Brokers have more than enough at their disposal in order to be the best of the best. So one of the things that also changes the game in the Brokers' favor is the fact that Black and Red are held back. Now, I don't think Black is super weak. I think it's decent, and especially if you want to say like the top cards performing in Black reach up into the realm of the white, blue, and green cards, I think that's true. But Red is definitely held back compared to the other ones. So just taking a look at the red cards, and particularly the red commons, I think is the most important or easiest way to see. So Strangle, it's a good card. You know, you want to play one in your red decks. Unlucky Witness has been not disappointing, but it's just okay. Light 'em Up, kind of the same thing. It's nice if you get the 2 for 2, but the Casualty 2 holds it back, and I think that was done intentionally, maybe for Constructed, I don't really know. Mayhem Patrol is a really good example. Like, if this were a 2-2 without Menace, it might actually be a little bit better, and that in and of itself might help red just a little bit. But the fact that it's a 1-2, it just holds it back a lot in the tempo game, because it's nice that it can push some damage. Yeah, it has Menace, it's more difficult to block. If you're being aggressive, you get the extra damage, but it's essentially just a 2-2 in terms of damage. And then when it's on defense, there are so few things that it can trade with because it only has the 1 power. And that just holds it back a ton. Like, you can't be attacking all the time. You can't always be on offense. Riveteer's Initiate, you know, I don't think any of the Initiates are particularly good, except for Obscura, just because it flies. The Riveteer's Requisitioner, again, it's a 2-mana 3-1. There are 2-mana 3-2s available. Rafine's Informant is practically a 2-mana 3-2. And then there's also the Crooked Custodian in black. The Treasure is kind of whatever. I mean, it's not the worst thing. The Blitz is fine, but it's overcosted. So it's a decent card, but just looking at the cards in the other colors that are kind of in the same position, this one's held back so much. And one of the best examples, too, is Exhibition Magician, because this one is kind of in that cycle of, with Jewel Thief and Inspiring Overseer. I know it's not a true cycle, but you can kind of compare them. So to either one, it doesn't fly, has the same stats as Inspiring Overseer, except it doesn't fly, and instead of giving you a card in life, you get these other 2 options that I think are both strictly worse. And then comparing it to Jewel Thief is silly. 3-3 with Vigilance and Trample. Like, the stats are just so much better, and you get the Treasure Token. And the added flexibility of being able to create a 1-1, like, that's just not enough to compare to 1 power and 2 toughness and Vigilance and Trample. It's just so much more value. So Exhibition Magician is just another red common, red card that looks decent, looks okay on paper, but just compared to some of the other things and the other colors in the set, it's just held back so much. You know, Professional Facebreaker and Jaxus. I thought Jaxus in particular was going to be good. You know, it has a Fable of the Mirror Breaker vibes, but their stats are held back. They're undercost or understated for their cost by a lot, and that is just a big deal here. They're not bad cards per se, but they're just held back also by being in red. Their stats and the fact that they're in red too. So I'm curious as to whether Fable of the Mirror Breaker would do well in Streets of New Capenna too, just because of the way the format is. It is 2 bodies, and you know, you get the other incidental value, so I think it probably still would be really strong. But along with all the other red cards that can't back it up very much, maybe you play it on the splash. I don't know. But that's all speculation. You know, it's a different format. It's whatever. Plasma Jockey also doesn't seem like a bad card, and it can do some work, but it's just understated for its cost by a lot. And then Sizzling Soloist, I think, as well, kind of in the same thing. Pugnacious Pugilist, just another example. It's just understated. It's good. It's a good card, but you have to play red and be deep in red in order to play Pugnacious Pugilist. So I'm a bit curious about the win rates here. So Pugnacious Pugilist, you know, 56%. That's pretty good. 56.5. And then Sizzling Soloist is held down all the way to like 51. Plasma Jockey doing okay at about 53. And then, yeah, I mean, Plasma Jockey is performing better than Jaxus, which is just silly. And Professional Facebreaker actually doing decent. It's almost up into the 60s. But again, this is a rare. Like, it's such a low-rated card compared to some of the commons and uncommons in the Broker's colors. You would think that this rare that gives you additional value, the way to push damage even because of the menace, that it would be performing better, but it's just not. It's just held back, and I think red is held back overall. Urabrask also kind of held back for the same reason. And I think Obnixilis too. He's a good card. I mean, he has a positive win rate. He's in the 60s, and he's difficult to deal with. But again, you're subtracting from your board in order to casualty Obnixilis, and if your opponent is just on the aggro tempo plan, they're going to kill you before Obnixilis kills them. So red overall held back. Alright, so now what I'd like to do is go over 3 decks that I trophied with that were not brokers and just talk about why I think they were successful and just go over some of the cards. So we have Mayhem Patrol I talked about. It's okay. I mean, you need 2-drops. You just need 2-drops in this set. Same with River Tears Initiate. The Death Touch is kind of whatever. It's potentially a way to push a little bit of damage, and it can work on defense as well, but it's not really what you want to be doing. Not terrible cards, just held back a little bit, but you do need the 2-drops, otherwise you're just going to get run over. Backup Agent I talked about, and Hold for Ransom and Rafine's Informant as well. These are good white cards. Attendant Socialite, again, another playable 2-drop that's not incredible. Oh, Black Market Tycoon. This was a bit of an experimental deck, I would say. I hadn't drafted this card before. I just wanted to see how it would perform. As you can see, I was playing 4 colors. I'm splashing for Broker's Ascendancy here. So I wanted to try out the Black Market Tycoon and see how he did. I did get to live the dream of turn 2 Black Market Tycoon, turn 4 Vivian on the Hunt. And I didn't realize or recognize when I first saw this card, I was like, you know, what's with the drawback? But you can, on turn 3, tap it. So now you have 4 mana, and then on turn 4, you tap it again. You've only taken 2 because you take it on your upkeep, and then you can play a 6-drop. So they wanted to hold that back a little bit with the 2 damage. So overall, it's just kind of a 2-mana dork. It's fine. Nothing special, but works okay in this kind of deck. Jetmir's Fixer is kind of the same thing. You know, if you can keep generating treasure over and over and it grows throughout the game, it's nice. You just usually don't have a lot of time to do that, but it's just another 2-mana 2/2, a 2-drop that is reasonable. And then Civil Servant I talked about as well. Just glad to have this card. Witty Roastmaster, you know, how many creatures did I have here? So 15. I didn't want to go down on creatures too much, and looking at the sideboard, you know, none of these, I don't like any of these creatures better than the Witty Roastmaster. I could have potentially played a Combat Trick instead. That might have been a good idea. It's hard to say, but I wanted to keep my creature count at least 15, and you need to have 3-drops as well. It's a way to push a little bit of additional damage too, but not a great card overall. Kill Shot, you just need removal in this format. You're going to get attacked. You're going to struggle to deal with flyers. So yeah, you need Kill Shot. Call on a Professional again, you need removal. It's nice that this can go face. It can kill Disciplined Duelists and things like that. Just something necessary and fine to have if you're already in red. Broken Wings, I think it's playable enough in Best of 1. May not be the best idea. I could have done something else, but I don't know. Maybe a Combat Trick would have been better instead. So maybe a mistake or a misplay on this one. But there are killable artifacts and enchantments as well. So it is playable, but you know, obviously it's held back a little bit just because it's so limited. But in this case, I didn't have any other way to deal with flyers at all, really. So if things were locked up on the ground and I had no way to push damage, and my opponent was just going to kill me with flyers, I kind of needed the Broken Wing. So a bit of a necessary evil there, you might say. Jewel Thief, of course, is great. Brazen Upstart, it's fine. I think Cabaretti is just kind of held back overall. This will end up trading with the 2-drop a reasonable amount of the time. Then you kind of draw a card. I missed with it before, which is very frustrating. Broker's Ascendancy, the best Ascendancy I talked about, I think worth splashing, especially since I can generate enough treasure to make it okay. I have a Broker's Hideout, a way to get the island, so you know, playable card here, and once it gets going, you're going to win. Quick Draw Dagger, I think the secret's out on this one. Very strong card. Combat Trick, way to push damage. You get extra damage. You can kind of 2-for-1. You know, LSV made a joke where he called this Ember Cleave, which it kind of feels like that sometimes. So again, this could potentially be replaced with one of the other combat tricks that I have, but I do like the Quick Draw Dagger better. It's a way to upgrade your creatures as well. 4 toughness or 5 toughness is really important, and the additional power is nice too. Stimulus Package, again, this is just part of the experiment, seeing how it would play out. I don't think that you really have a lot of time in this format to do many of these kind of value-y things like you would be doing a Stimulus Package. So I'd probably skip it, and this could easily be replaced, but I just wanted to see how it would do. Fleetfoot Dancer, this one is interesting because you would think that it would be super strong in a tempo format, huge life swing, and I think what holds it back is maybe that it's just a little bit expensive. Your opponents can usually trade for it pretty easily, they have other cards that have already drawn them other cards and stuff like that. So certainly not a bad card at all. Held back a little bit just by the fact that it's in red, which I talked about limitations there. But a decent card. Let's see how it's doing here. So yeah, like almost a 62% win rate. It's performing really, really well. So certainly a good card, worth getting into red for, and served me well in this draft too. Pugnacious Pugilist I talked a little bit about. Again, just ways to push more damage. Called Eye Strong Harm, kind of the same thing. And Cleanup Crew. Vivian on the Hunt. This was the first time I drafted her, so I wanted to try her out. I wouldn't say that she was disappointing. I mean, I won the games where I cast her. But again, the format's so fast that a 6-mana play, if your opponent could potentially kill you really quickly, and they could kill her as well, and it's tough to get all the value you want out of them sometimes. So Vivian on the Hunt, this was the first time I drafted her, so I wanted to give her a try. Actually, she's not performing super great. She only has like a 57.5% win rate, and I think that's just because of how expensive she is. She doesn't come down and just kind of win the game. Making a 4/4 for 6 mana, essentially not super great. She can be killed by flyers, killed pretty easily. So you don't always get the value out of her that you want, especially for 6 mana. I think even like Cleanup Crew, you get more out of that. And Cleanup Crew has a 1% higher win rate than even Vivian does, which is just kind of funny. It's just not a format for these kinds of value cards that are expensive, which is too bad because I tend to enjoy that kind of thing. But yeah, Vivian was fun to play with. It was fun to cast her on turn 4, but maybe she could have been replaced with something else. Even a combat trick might have been better. And then going over the mana base, you want to have, for your core colors, because you usually want to have be playing 2 colors, you want to have 8 sources for those colors. So for white I have 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and then for red 4, 5, 6, 7, and for green 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So red held back a little bit, and yeah, so I had fewer. It might have made more sense to actually go down a plains and go up a mountain, but also just an issue with this deck is that I'm kind of straight up playing 3 colors. You usually don't want to be doing that. You want to just have a splash for particularly powerful colors, like splashing for Broker's Ascendancy, of course. Black Market Tycoon, Jetmir's Fixer, not really splash cards that are worth splashing, I would say. And then with the white cards as well, Kill Shot, Backup Agent, Hold for Ransom, Rafine's Informant, not worth splashing. Fleetfoot Dancer probably is. And Rafine's Informant, definitely very strong, but the thing is, if you're splashing for Rafine's Informant, you are not going to be able to play it until probably later in the game, so it's held back a little bit there. So you want to avoid splashing, and it might have been better to just go green-white, try not to focus on red, and just leave it for the splash for probably just Fleetfoot Dancer and cut all the other red cards. But it's tough to say. I don't remember exactly what the draft went like. So that was this deck. I think I got a little bit lucky with this one. It shouldn't have performed quite as well as it did, getting the trophy. And then my mana base I messed a little bit up on, and probably should have played a combat trick or 2 as well to back everything up. But a trophy nonetheless. So we'll go over a couple of other decks here. So this is an Obscura deck, and just to talk about the cards, Skycrier I've talked a little bit about. Disdainful Stroke I find playable. It's one of those situations where you want to be able to back it up with other instant speed stuff to do, and as long as you have that, if you can get your opponent's turn 4 super strong play that's going to get them back in the game, their Echo Inspector or something like that, it feels really good. And you're probably going to win the game because of that. So a playable card for sure. People will have 4 drops, you're going to have targets, and especially in a deck with blue, you're going to have ways to connive it away if it just doesn't fit the matchup. Fairy Vandal I talked about as well. Crooked Custodian, not a card that you want to sleep on. And the big thing about this card is the stats. The fact that it enters the battlefield tapped usually doesn't matter all that much. You don't want to be defensive with this card. You want to be offensive. It pushes damage. And you can compare it to the other 2 drops like the Civic Gardener, Attended Socialite. These cards that have 2 drops that have kind of minor upside. This is the same thing in that 1 power is its minor upside. And it can win you games. I mean, I cast one of these on turn 2 and turn 3. Then by turn 4, my opponent's down to 11 just from these 2 cards alone. So very important in a tempo format. So don't sleep on this card. Draft it. if you're in black, of course, it's not a first pickable card or anything like that, but if you're in black, you want a couple of these, maybe more. Snooping Newsy, it's kind of the same thing. I think that I overvalued Snooping Newsy in this draft. I really wanted to do the thing, but if you look at my mana value distribution, 3, 4, I only have 6 options for different cards cost to have, and then just 2 4s, 1 5, and 1 7. And then the Shattered Seraph, I think I was kind of playing just because I wanted to help enable the Snooping Newsies as well. And actually throughout the entire draft, I never enabled them once. So they were just 2 mana 2/2s. Now there was a bit of a threat of activation where they were up to 4 and I had my Psychic Pickpocket on the battlefield, and my opponent could have traded with it, or I could have just swung in with it. And if they had traded with it, then all of my Snooping Newsies, which I think I had 3 of them on the battlefield too, they all would have been turned on. So it's not that it did absolutely nothing, this power, but I thought going into the set, and I think I'm pretty much correct, that the 5 or more mana values it would happen, but it would be more of a late game thing, a bit difficult to enable, and not worth building your deck around. Like, you don't want to put in undervalued cards or bad cards just for the potential that you get different mana values and that they'll end up working. So, a bit of a mistake, I would say, in this draft, overvaluing the Snooping Newsies a little bit, but still a fine card and a playable 2-drop you want to include. Tainted Indulgence, kind of the same thing. I just really like drawing cards, but this is not the best card for this format for sure. Got an Inspiring Overseer, which is nice. Rogues Gallery is interesting. I think it is a nice card if you manage to do a lot of trades. You can hit your opponent early, they have their other creatures you're trading off, and then you Rogues Gallery, you get a whole bunch of value back. It's good in that case, and it's good to have one of those kinds of cards, I think. But some people are off of Rogues Gallery. I kind of like it, but it's just kind of a one-of, and you still want to be able to have a lot of creatures to get back early and make early trades and stuff like that. So Murder, and for that matter Void Rend, removal is still necessary in this format. Don't undervalue removal, don't overvalue it. I think that the kind of 2 removal spells that I have here is good. Because eventually your opponent's going to play a creature that you just can't attack past, a 4 toughness creature or something like that, and then all your Crooked Custodians are locked up, and you just need to be able to kill that, get that out of the way, and keep pushing the damage. So you do still need removal in this format, of course. Nightclubber has been performing excellently. I think it's Black's best uncommon, and Black's best uncommon other than Corpse Appraiser, which is multicolored, of course. Exotic Pets has also been performing really well, although not for me. I haven't had a ton of success with it. It's okay, it's just more of an offensive card. If you can get the counters on them, it gets better. Way to push damage, but if you look at this as like a 3 mana 2/2 on defense, it's just not very good. So, but it's performing super well. Maybe I just play it wrong, I don't know. Obscura Charm, I think it's playable just because the 2 and 3 drops are so important. You can remove one from your opponent's side or get one back from your side. Imagine getting back an Inspiring Overseer at instant speed. Playable card for sure. And then the counter is just some nice additional upside. So I didn't think that this card was going to be very good just because it's held back so much. But the up to turn 3 or mana value 3 permanents creatures are just so important that it turns out to matter quite a lot. Toulouse has impressed me, and again, it's those stats. Is a 3 mana 4/2. It can hit hard. Connives, looting in general is just good and limited, and then you can potentially get the cards back, so you can trade this pretty aggressively too. And then if you have other ways to connive, of course, you get additional value on top of that. So a nice aggressive creature that also gives you value. Just a good thing to have in this format. Quick Draw Dagger I talked about. Revel Ruiner, another way to push damage, hits really hard. With the Menace, you can sometimes get a 2-for-1 if either that or your opponent's just taking 4. Pushing damage, just what you want to be doing and need to be doing. And then the Psychic Pickpocket, of course. And then Shattered Seraph, probably cuttable. It's never going to be super great, but looking at the sideboard, I don't think that there's really much that I would include instead. Maybe the Dapper Shieldmate, Deal Gone Bad, another removal. Join the Maestros, possibly. It can be okay. Or Combat Trick, Revelation of Power. So those are some options instead of the Shattered Seraph, but I think that they're all approximately on the same level. But So could have drafted it a little bit differently, who knows. And then in terms of the mana base for white, I have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 whites, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 blues, and 6, 7, 8 blacks. So good on blue and black. And yeah, so only 7 whites. So having 7 white sources, I think is okay in that case. So I think the mana base is not perfect, but it's pretty good, better than the deck that we just looked at before. And then finally, we'll go over the last deck that I trophied with. This is also the deck that got me to Mythic, just to talk a little bit more about the cards here. Expendable Lackey, it's playable, it's nice to get the value, be able to connive it, whatever. But nothing super special. Witness Protection, again, just necessary evil of removal, you need it. Make Disappear, I've talked about, just good to get your opponent's early drops. Crooked Custodian, of course. Fake Your Own Death, definitely playable because of how aggressive it is. You can deal 2 extra damage. It's value, you trade up, you get a creature back. The treasure it's nice to have. Definitely combat tricks in general, I think they're all playable, and Fake Your Own Death is just another combat trick, and it's definitely playable. Kind of a guaranteed way to save your creature as well, so don't skip on them. And then Assuming Newsy for good measure. Dig Up the Body, kind of similar to Rogue's Gallery. It has less upside, I would say, because you can only get 2 creatures back, and you have to give 1 up in order to do it, but it is also instant speed, so you can instantly give up something that you don't need, and you can get that creature back as well if you need to. Midnight Assassin, so this is called Murder at Home, I guess. It's playable, I don't love it, but again, it's just kind of a necessary evil in terms of just being removal, just sitting there and trading off with your opponent's flyer or some other creature that you're just not going to be able to beat any other way, and can lock up the game. Better in this kind of deck, which this is a more mid-range deck than the other ones we've looked at, which were more aggressive. This is a good card for mid-rangey decks because you want the game to go longer. If you're trying to push damage and be just hardcore aggro and just tempo your opponent out, you probably don't want Midnight Assassin, but in this kind of deck it's better. Rafine Silencer and Nightclubber, they're kind of similar. They're both pretty clean answers to Discipline Duelist, which is nice. Both strong cards overall. Aggressive, good additional value, ways to push damage and built-in removal out of the way. And Sleep with the Fishes, just good removal, good tempo cards. Revel Ruiner, talk about again. Whack, don't underestimate Whack. It was kind of weird. It's like, why this only gives -4/-4, it doesn't even kill, and it's 4 mana. Hitting white creatures is cool and all, and at sorcery speed, like, those things are all bad. But what's important to keep in mind in this format is that 4 toughness is kind of where the cap is, so this kills most things. So we can look at, let's see, set S and C, toughness greater than 4. So, Crocodile, Wrecking Crew, and then pretty much everything else is rare. So anything that Whack doesn't hit is either super expensive. I mean, they're all super expensive, even the rares are, but they're pretty much all rares. There are very few creatures like Glamorous Outlaw. Yeah, I can't kill that. That's a bit of a pain. Mass Bandit's not particularly good. And then, but everything else it kills. And so, yeah, I mean, again, necessary evil removal that you want. And being able to kill white creatures with 4 toughness for 1 mana, like a Darling of the Masses or something like that, that can really swing the game in your favor and help you win. So don't underestimate Whack. You can play it in multiples too. I think I probably just didn't draft one. I have some other removal-ish things here in these 3 cards, and Witness Protection and the Hostile Takeover. I think this is the number 3 card in the set, which is kind of silly. Just absolutely bananas. Take down your opponent's entire board, save your strongest creature, potentially 2 creatures if you have other 4 toughness creatures going on. I have Grow Dragoons, Cormella, and then you get to hit your opponent even harder. Like, you use it, your Expendable Lackey is a 4/4, and then it hits them for 4, so just a crazy powerful card, and it shows. Syndicate Infiltrator, aggressive stats for the cost, 3/3 flyer, can hit hard, potentially a 5/5 in the late game, very strong, good to play in multiples. Flyers are just good in this format. Cormella, this is definitely a cuttable card. She's not amazing. She doesn't have the stats that are really there. The mana boost doesn't really come up. However, I did get my hostile takeover back with Cormella once in a game, so that was pretty handy. But could be something else, I think, especially since the only real reason for me to be playing mountains is hostile takeover. Definitely the kind of card that's worth splashing. And Glamorous Outlaw is fine. Got the good stats, got the 5 toughness, deals extra damage to your opponent, scries you to make sure that you can win the game. And then Duskmangler has been playable as well, although in this draft I actually didn't even see Duskmangler. I don't think. I might have connived it or something like that. I really don't remember. So, and then for the mana base, we have 8 blue sources, 5, 6, 7, 8 black sources as well, and then 4 red sources. So this is kind of the perfect mana base. If you're splashing 2 cards, which I am, it's 3, but Glamorous Outlaw can splash itself. You don't usually want to be doing that, but by the time you want to cast these, it's pretty likely that you have the additional mountain that you need as well. So this is a deck that can definitely beat brokers, and I did multiple times as well. So just going over some examples of non-brokers decks that can still do quite well, and just the things to keep in mind, the kind of cards you need, the kind of curve you want. This is going to help you beat brokers in the format and beat all the other decks in the format too. But it helps to have one of the most powerful cards in the set, of course. Alright, so I hope this was interesting. I hope it helped some people. I just wanted to talk about some of the cards in the format, give my thoughts on the format. So I'll close just by talking a little bit about the format in general. And one good thing about the format, I would say, is I've never been very good at playing aggro or tempo decks in Limited. It's just not my thing. So in this format, I pretty much had to learn to play it. So it's a good thing in that sense. I know it sounds kind of silly. It's like, oh, the good thing is I had to learn how to do this. But it's good to have additional skills in Magic in general. So in that sense, definitely happy to be forced to learn a new skill and something that I can apply more in the future. But of course, it's also a bit of a downside. I think one of the things that has disappointed people is just how tempo-y this format is. Very aggressive, all based on tempo. And what that means is you don't have a lot of time to be playing 3 colors and 4 colors. I think going into the format, we thought every deck is going to be 3 colors. Sometimes it'll splash a 4th color, and then 5 color decks are going to be viable. But that's not the case at all. You generally want or need to be 2 colors. Maybe you splash a 3rd color for something like Disciplined Duelist or Lagrella or some really powerful card that's outside of your colors. But you just don't have time to be setting up and splashing colors. And I think that just with how tempo-y this format is, at least for me, I feel like there are so many unwinnable games, especially on the draw. Your opponent does 2-drop, powerful 2-drop, or Fiend's Informant, powerful 3-drop, Jewel Thief, and you haven't even gotten a chance to play anything yet at all, and it's just like, well, I'm taking, I'm down to 17, and then they're going to put me down to 11 next turn, and I haven't even played anything, and they have all this other value. It just feels unwinnable, and that happens, and those are all commons, so that happens pretty often, I would say, which is very frustrating. It's frustrating for me, and I imagine that it's been frustrating for other people. People have been kind of negative about this format. I think like the Twitch numbers are down. Overall, not a format that people have enjoyed a lot, and I kind of agree. I like Magic the Gathering in general, and I like all the formats, and playing it's been fine. I've had some enjoyable experiences too, but especially coming off of Kamigawa, which I thought was an excellent format. I think most people agree. This one has been just a little bit disappointing, and I don't want to be too harsh. I think it's important to criticize the game mechanics and the gameplay and just get specific about what our criticisms are, and not necessarily try to criticize the people who create the game or the whole game experience and the other things that are behind that. That's just my opinion about how we should handle criticism as a community. But so trying to stay positive, it is nice to be kind of forced into learning how to play a tempo format. And it is kind of funny just with the 3-colorness and the expectations going into the set. I think that may be what's more disappointing. Like if this were a different set where there were a monocolored theme, or it was just your typical guild set where there are 5 2-color families and then there's a big monocolored theme, and it was a very aggro tempo format, maybe people wouldn't be so disappointed, or or upset. It's just the fact that we expected this kind of grindy three-color, multicolor format, and it turned out to be this hardcore tempo format where there's really no other strategy that you can do. You just have to go tempo. Maybe just a little bit disappointing, but I'm not sure. Also, the fact that there's the color imbalance, the family imbalance. Broker's clearly the strongest, white the strongest, red is weak. These things happen, and they're not always the biggest deal in the world. Like Kamigawa, I think, was kind of a good example where red was kind of weak, but it still had decks that it could perform in, and that's true here too. There was the red-black sacrifice deck that I think is performing very well. So it's not like this doesn't happen sometimes, or even almost all the time. I mean, there's always going to be weakest color in a limited format. It's just what happens. But just another thing to add to people's disappointment. And then finally, just in terms of the lore and the flavor of the set, I think it's okay. And those things don't matter a lot to me. They matter just a little bit. I'm more of a gameplay guy, a mechanics guy. That's what's interesting to me, so I don't care too much about the lore. But looking at Jewel Thief is just an example. It's like, this is a rogue, so why does it have vigilance and trample and these push stats? You know, rogues are supposed to be understated. You would expect this to be like the treasure token I get, but you would expect this to be like a 2 and a green for a 2/2 flash or something like that as a rogue. And what I speculate happened, although I'm not sure, maybe it was something like that originally, and then late in the format they decided to push this card. They gave it the crazy stats, and they didn't have time to change the name or the art or whatever it is. I'm just speculating. I mean, maybe that's not what happened at all. Maybe it was like this from the beginning, but that's just an example of like, we all play RPGs, we all play fantasy games. Why is this rogue like super tough and strong? And again, I'm not a big flavor guy. Those things don't matter to me a lot, but when it's something like this, it's just a little bit distracting in the gameplay. Also, it's been pointed out that like the citizen thing is like a real sub-theme. There aren't that many cards that care about citizens, but you don't know just by looking at a card whether it's a citizen or not. You have to look at the type line. So there are just a few things here and there, and some like arena will take care of it kinds of things that maybe they affect paper play a little bit more. I don't play in paper, I only play on arena, so it doesn't affect me personally that much, but just things like that that I think maybe seem just a little bit sloppy, and I think that's making people disappointed. I wouldn't say that I'm like super disappointed, but I'll just put it this way: I'm hoping that the next set is a little bit better of an experience overall. And this hasn't been a bad experience. I played it a lot. I got to Mythic and everything in Limited, so it's been okay. But I'm looking forward to what we have to come next. And another bad thing, I guess, about this is that we're going to have the set until September, so we'll be dealing with it for a while. But yeah, I'm done being negative with that stuff for now. But just had to get my criticisms or critiques out there. But overall, I hope you enjoyed this content. I plan to make more stuff like this, go over more decks, and I'll have some gameplay content as well. I'll do that next time, maybe something for Standard. I'm not quite sure yet. But thank you for tuning in, and I'll see you next time.